So I'm not a natural born speaker, so I prefer to stand behind the podium and not walk on the stage. Um, what I'm going to talk about today is I think it's a bit, it's try and understand how we can look at businesses a little differently. I have no doubt whatsoever that all of you know your businesses the best. And all I'm trying to do is to say, can we look at businesses a little differently? And I'm trying to use physics, which I think is simpler than business, to try and illustrate my point. This particular slide, a lot of people read differently, where, it's that classic, if you keep going at it. I'm sorry, I can't really hear myself, it's too loud. If you keep going at it, you'll reach, your destination. In business, sometimes it's also good to stop. So, you know. So the whole concept, I think, when Gina first spoke to me was to talk about, how we can build a resilient business that's sustainable. And in my mind, resilience is bounce. It's the bounce of a tennis ball. It's this whole thing of getting back up. It's the thing about grit. And it's the ability to recover in one sense. So I thought, how do I best try and illustrate bounce in a business context? It wasn't easy. So I moved to physics. I think a lot of us understand the basics of physics. And, bounce is basically force, which is mass into acceleration. A key point to note over here is that mass is not weight. Weight needs gravity. And mass is an intrinsic property of matter. It doesn't change. A tennis ball is a tennis ball. Cone of lead is lead. You can't really change it. And the way to look at it as a business, the way to look at resilience from a business perspective, I thought that maybe we need to define what is an intrinsic property of a business. And to me, the intrinsic property of a business is cash flows. And why I say that is that, cash flows occur, they happen. You don't need an accountant to tell you that cash flow is happening. Profits, on the other hand, are accounting measures and, receivables and so on and so forth. So I wanted to focus on saying, how do we think about our businesses from a very, very intrinsic point of view? And that answer was that, what is the type of cash flows that my business, generates? So if you look at cash flows as an intrinsic part of a business and compare that to what we would call density, in physics. So, lead is more dense than wood and so on and so forth. Is how do we make our businesses more dense? How do we make them more solid? And when you look at it, how do we ineffectively strengthen our cash flows? I sort of break those answers into, these 3 or 4 categories. The number one category, and I know it sounds like a cliche, talent and human capital and stuff like that, but the fact is, no business exists without people. So, it's not that a product appears on the market and then somebody tries to sell it. Actually, a product is first developed and designed by somebody who's then trying to sell it. And over here, in all the years that one has been in the business world, I follow a very simple mantra, which is you hire for attitude and you pay for aptitude. So what do I mean by that? You're trying to hire a junior accountant. You will try and hire somebody who you think fits within your organization. And that is the attitude. So, you're looking for certain subjective qualities. They're not easy to measure, but that is what I call attitude. You will pay that person based on his or her educational experience, education qualifications, experience, long-term fit, how do you see them going forward in your organization? And sometimes we mix the two. We tend to hire people that we like, you know, which is a normal cognitive bias. Everybody likes to see mirror images of themselves. So you end up hiring people just for attitude and paying them for attitude. And then very quickly, disappointment sets in because you hired somebody who was not, fit enough for the role that you wanted, and you hired them because you just liked them. So that's the key, difference between hiring for attitude and paying for aptitude. The other thing is hire slowly, fire quickly. So take your time in making that hiring decision. All of us, tend to be in a hurry. Somebody or the other has pressure. We need the sales guy. He's gone. Hire slowly. And if you made a hiring mistake, fire quickly. It's tough, it's unpleasant, it's messy, but fire them quickly. I'm not so sure about the source of this information, but they say that if you make a bad hire and you have to then fire and rehire, that's generally equivalent to 11 months' salary of the person you just fired or just hired. So be deliberate in your decisions to hire. The final point is, and a lot of us, who exist in the SME world, will probably shrug their shoulders when I mention this thing. Include variable pay in the package. Everybody will say, oh, we are not a Google and we are not Microsoft and we don't give 3 months bonus and we don't do, commissions, look at my cost structure. If you want to go from being an SME to a stable company, you need to have people who are incentivized to take you there. So, if you think that you're going to hire somebody bright who's going to work for a fixed salary, very quickly what happens is that the marginal value of that person will reduce because he or she will figure out that whether or not I do more work or less, I'm still going to get my paycheck. So that needs to be, you need to incentivize that, and I think small companies need to stop shying away from having a bonus or some sort of performance-based incentive. You can afford it. Those people will let you afford it. So do that. Then I come back to the issue of the density of the depth of service or the product that you're offering. And these are all self-evident. I'm not going to spend too much time. Your product or service needs to have the best features, best service, and pricing. And the example I want to give here is that how sometimes, you need to think about it differently. So many years ago, I used to work for Jumbo Electronics. And I don't know, I think I see people in the room who might still remember that we used to have a product called a VCP. It was called a video cassette player. The first innovation on the video cassette player was something called VCP plus R. VCP with recording. So it was not a video cassette recorder. It was a video cassette player with a recording capability, and that was done through some AV in-out, kind of connection. That is innovation, So most people think of it like innovation is the next Google, or innovation is, I don't know, the new Uber. Yes, they are, but there are many different types of innovation. So here we were in the middle of the Middle East. We were principally an agent of Sony. And, we were thinking about markets where basically, emerging markets, not so much disposable income. And it was us sitting somewhere in Bardubai brainstorming about how do we, get people to start buying these VCPs because the customers were still, the trade-off was you can't record. So whatever I pay for the VCP is not really worth it because everybody wanted this recording function whether or not they ever recorded anything. So we went back to the factories in Japan and said, you know what, we want recording, but it shouldn't be a VCR. And back and forth, we went through this process and we came up with this VCP plus R. I don't know, we tripled sales or it went up 5 times, but that was not all. So in those days, we used to sell these boxes out of containers in many emerging markets. There were no retail malls in Moscow. South Africa was just opening up. So in many cases, the local dealers would come to the customs bonded warehouse. We would open the container, and these VCPs would be removed from the container directly to these shopkeepers. And what we did was, so the VCPs came in this very nice color printed carton with some picture of Mount Fuji or something on it. And we then put a plastic handle on top of that box. It was a very nice cardboard box, but if you were a trader, you had to sort of lug 3 boxes. All we did was put plastic handles on the boxes, so that now you could lift. A lot of these people would buy just 6 VCPs from us. You could lift those 6 boxes now and walk back to your truck or car or cycle or whatever. That gave us an even bigger jump than VCP plus R. So, that's the story I'm trying to say, is that, innovations can be very small things, and they don't necessarily, demand a PhD in physics. Then we look at the other, empirical evidence that you see about density. German companies around the world, German companies are seen as the flag bearers of SMEs. And the reason they are seen as the flag bearers is that because they have extremely dense products and services. So, one small example, family-run business in Germany makes only one thing. They make something called the Jimmy Jib. And the Jimmy Jib is that crane that movie crews use to shoot moving objects. That is the only product that company makes, from grandfather to father to son. They don't do anything else. They only make this one mechanized crane that a movie director can put a camera on, and it does all that. They sell $1 billion of that every year. So, if you are who you are in the movie making business, there is nobody else you go to. Now, I know it's not necessarily relevant that all businesses have to be so unique and so differentiated, but it's a key takeaway of building density into the product or offering, product or service that you're offering. Then we come to the customer. I think, especially in terms of working capital management, it is sometimes a clever thing to do to pick your customers. So, I don't know, it is, at least in my SME experience, where, working capital was always a challenge. A lot of the banks say that, we have an SME bank and we have an SME relationship manager, and only thing that SME relationship manager wants to do is drop your account. So it's very important to think about the customer, and the trade-off is fairly simple. Do you sell to somebody at a higher margin, or do you sell to somebody who gives you your money faster? It's as simple as that. And I go back to my first point, margins are not cash flows. They're accounting measures. So that is something that in the day-to-day rush of meeting sales targets and moving working capital, we lose that perspective. So pick your customers carefully, especially in bad times. Then we come to suppliers, and I think it's the same scenario, in the sense you need to pick your suppliers carefully. What is the supplier brand? What is the terms that the suppliers are offering you? All of that, and I'm not going to spend too much time telling you about how to deal with suppliers. But one thing that I learned in my days with Jumbo or other SMEs is that we, as the intermediaries, sometimes think either we know best because, hey, I'm the guy on the ground, I know what's happening, 2 dirham price difference will kill this product, etc., etc. So I think short-term, day-to-day activity, I'm sure the SME is more switched on than the principal. However, there is a key difference in expertise that we do not necessarily try and learn from the principal. What do I mean by that? Large companies, while focusing on the day-to-day, also tend to have extremely good forecasting capabilities. So sometimes if you have a supplier, it's not a very difficult thing to have a conversation with them to ask them, okay, how do you see the world going in selling diesel generators in the next 1 year? And it's a useful exercise for you to see as to how the principal sees it versus how you see it. So, this is something that I would encourage everybody to talk to your principal suppliers to see how they see the world in your industry, because they probably have a better view than you do. This is a specifically Dubai and UAE problem. To take 60 days of credit from your supplier and sell it to your customer for 30 days of credit, it's not a business. So if any one of you is in this business, like a lot of people are, in Dubai especially, it's a zero density business. It's musical chairs, the music will stop. So this is something that people need to really, really think about. That if you're just moving working capital, that's not a business for you. And finally, we hear a lot of self-pity from SMEs. This victim mentality. Banks don't want us, government treats us unfairly, economy is bad. The fact is, you are the economy. You take any country's statistics, I'm not going to bore you with that. 60 to 90% of all businesses in every country are SMEs. The more advanced the market, the higher the percentage of SMEs. 60% or more is generally the people of the employable population is employed by SMEs. Again, more advanced the market, higher the share of people employed by the SMEs. So, you are the economy. If you guys are not doing well, the economy is not doing well. I don't know how much of it is cause and effect, but the fact is SMEs need to think of themselves as being the economy. Cooperate, nice cliche. How do you do that? Difficult. But I think industry-wide pools of expertise, talent, something that people can share without necessarily threatening each other. Silicon Valley is a good example, of how small companies, they have access to a pool of capital. To use economic terms, they have simplified the transaction piece. If you have worked in a startup somewhere and that startup failed, nobody cares about the failure. They mostly care about what you did at that startup. So that's something to think about. The other thing is there a pool of capital available for SMEs? Can SMEs do something to set up a fund or things like that? As I said, none of these are easy to do. They were just, thoughts. You obviously compete. So competition is, what I mean to say is that people, yes, again, when you go down to the street, everybody says, oh, competition is only on price. I'm not so sure. Price is one factor of competition, but it can also be, there are other issues of, features, service, what is it that, your relationship with your customer, etc. So this is again something that is a good goal to have, is that you don't compete just on price. And finally, in terms of influence, as I said, if we look at ourselves as being the economy, we should be able to influence the economy. So whether it's, talking to the chambers of commerce or the banking associations or to the government, SMEs need to look at themselves, as this dense pool of businesses that are not, disparate. You are one. And, I think that might help in the overall aid and assistance or credit and things like that SMEs need. Thanks.